In this video, we'll have a quick look at subdivision surfaces inside of Maya, and specifically we'll look at the subdivision surface primitives in order to look at what subdivision surfaces actually are. So subdivs have their own tab here. It says subdivs. These are also known as subds or just subdivision surfaces. And you can see that there are a number of options here, and these are just your basic primitive shapes as well as a few little light editing tools for these subdivision surfaces. So they're pretty self-explanatory: a sphere, a cube, a cylinder. Let's have a look at what one of these does. I'm going to go ahead and drop in a subdivision surface sphere. Now, one thing to note is if I click on here, it's going to immediately drop it. I don't get the opportunity to drag it in or scale it. I can obviously go in after the fact to my sphere, subdiv sphere here, in my options, and change the scale to make it a different size or something like that. But I don't get any options as I create it. And likewise, if I go to create subdiv primitives and go to the different things here, you notice that these do not have option boxes. Polygon primitives all have option boxes, NURBS primitives all have option boxes, but these subdiv primitives do not have option boxes. And that's because they lack some of the general editing capabilities that other primitives have. So we can look at them relatively quickly. Now, if I drop this in here and look at it, the first opinion that you might get of this sphere is pretty underwhelming because it looks basically like a cube that's been divided into 4 polygons on each side and then given a little bit of a scale on those center vertices. So not all that impressive. But if I go ahead and create a render of this, let's make a render preview. I'm going to go up here at the top to my render current frame, and I want to make sure that at first here that my rendering engine is set to Maya software, which is actually the default. I'm going to go ahead and click and render that. You can see all of a sudden it looks very nice and smooth. Okay, so what's going on here? Subdivision surfaces actually are taking the polygons that are there and then they're dividing them to appear smooth when you render. Now you can also preview these smooth. So if you look here under the subdiv sphere 1 shape, you can see that I have this subdiv surface display, and right now the resolution is set to 1. I can take it down to 0 and it's going to get even chunkier. There it is at 2, starting to look better. 3, and there you go. You have something that looks pretty decent. Now this is also something that you can control with the 1, 2, and 3 numbers right on your keyboard. So 1, 2, 3. If you look down here in the bottom, you can see the display command that's fired off is subdiv display smoothness 3. Smoothness 1, 2, 3. And that way you can get a better preview as to what is going on here with the subdivision surfaces. Now the nice thing about subdivs is that you can edit these and they retain a lot of their smoothness. So if I go ahead and right click on this and go to edges, you can see that my basic shape here is essentially just a cube. So if I select this edge right here and I move that around, you can see that I get nice deformation and that everything stays pretty much nice and smooth. Now I can also go into my vertices, and let's say I want to select these 2 vertices here and scale them towards each other. There we go. And let's just push them back in and down a little bit more, make this thing a little bit more concave. So you can see that I get all of this editing capability. If I go back to my basic shape with the subdiv level at 1, and you can see it just looks like a pretty flattened out, blocky, ugly thing. But again, when we go ahead and render, or when we set our subdivision display up, we get something that's much nicer. Now, what you don't have in here is a lot of editing capabilities. So let me go back in here and undo all that transformation that I'd done. And I have a hard time making something that is relatively hard-edged with this. Now, I can make completely creased surfaces here, so I can go and you can see here that we have these 2 options for creasing and then uncreasing edges or vertices. So I can click on that. You can see that it has sharpened off this edge that runs around there. Okay, so let's do that all the way around the top here. So I'm going to select all of these top edges and then go ahead and sharpen those up. And now you can see I'm getting something a little bit more cylindrical. So let's go ahead and get these ones on the bottom. We'll do the same thing. We'll actually end up with a full cylinder. Okay, now any individual edge or vertex can have this effect applied to it. You can see now I can take the converse of that and soften this one here, and it's going to have a little hard time displaying much because I don't have too much going on there. So let's go ahead and grab more of these and soften them. And really, because I have the full crease, we're not seeing much happen. So if I go back to my edges, and let's go ahead and select, say maybe 2 on that side, and uncrease those, you can see that now that this is rounded here and then hard edged there. Okay, so that way you can get some basic editing functionality here. So I could go down and let's change this by taking these two edges here, increasing those. And you can see I'm getting this nice kind of rounded shape here around the back, but it creases around the edges. And that will render up just as you would expect it to also. You can see we're getting a nice crease there. And come around to a different angle so you can see it a little bit better. There you go. So you're seeing that nice creased edge. Now, that's really about as much as you're going to get on the basic editing levels of subdivision surfaces here with these native subds. But subds are a very powerful tool, and they can allow you to do a lot more with your geometry because you can deal with, in real time, objects that look like this, that take up very little display memory, that are very light, and even if you have thousands or tens of thousands of these on screen, it's not going to cause you a lot of problems. But then when you go ahead and you render, you get something nice and smooth like that. And that's where subdivision surfaces are going to make your modeling experience much easier, as opposed to doing something like this with actual polygons. You're going to be dealing with lots and lots and lots of little tiny polygons, and then going in and making any edits to this is going to be just an absolute pain. If I wanted to go into a really dense polygon model and do something like this, where I move this down and in just to change the whole contour of this shape, and I'll go ahead and render that. To get that change in the contour, that would be absolutely a nightmare with a very dense polygon mesh. But here in subdivision surfaces, very easy. So there you go, subdivision surfaces and how they work in modeling and at render time.